Isme kikrim ya.
Oh, should mention, your powers are gonna start kicking in right about now.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. I had a chance to see the new Supergirl movie. This will be my non-spoilery review. I know you have a ton of questions about the movie in general, so I'll try to explain what I thought of it, whether or not it works in James Gunn's DCU as a whole, and how Millie Alcock, the actress, feels as the new Supergirl of the DCU. We got a lot of Super Family to talk about, and a lot of Jason Momoa's Lobo. He is having more fun in this movie than almost any other character in the DCU so far. There were some things that the movie did very well, and a couple of things on the other side of that I didn't think worked for me. I will try to address as much of those as possible without getting into spoilers. I will be doing a full breakdown, Easter eggs, and post-credit scenes videos for the movie after it comes out in theaters later this week, so be sure to subscribe if you're brand new to my channel to get all those videos. They'll be coming very soon. We will use those videos to talk about the next steps for Supergirl in the DCU going forward and how she's going to fit into the upcoming movies like Superman, Man of Tomorrow. They were literally talking about that on the red carpet. Clayface is technically the next DCU movie after this later this year, but it takes place way earlier in the timeline. Man of Tomorrow is like the next movie after Supergirl during the present day of the DCU. And because this movie jumps around in the timeline a lot, the movie itself does address the timeline between her origin story on Krypton, her backstory, then the events of the first Superman movie with her post-credit scene, and next, the Man of Tomorrow movie. James Gunn is making her a very big part of the DCU, just like Superman is a big part of the DCU. Supergirl is played by Millie Alcock, who most of you will know from House of the Dragon Season 1. She played the young version of Rhaenyra for the first half of Season 1. I'm in the middle of doing House of the Dragon Season 3 episodes right now, like we literally just did Episode 1. James Gunn is the person who cast her originally for the DCU for that Superman movie for the post-credit scene, saying that he was watching House of the Dragon Season 1 and thought that she would make a great Supergirl in his DCU, so like he does have big plans for her in the future movies. Coincidentally, Jason Momoa, who plays Lobo, also played Khal Drogo briefly during the original Game of Thrones main series, which I also did videos for all those seasons back in the day. But at least in the Game of Thrones universe, they never shared any scenes together like with Millie Alcock. Their characters lived during very different time periods.
A crown for a king.
In the movie, we learn about the origin story of Kara Zor-El, Supergirl, living on Krypton during its destruction. She's from Argo City, a different city that Superman lived in when he was a baby, Kal-El, on Krypton, where she lived with her father, Zor-El, played by David Krumholtz, who was fun in the movie. He's the brother of Jor-El, Superman's father. That's why she's Superman's cousin, and they both had the idea to send their children in pods to Earth to save them. We also meet her mother, Allura Inze, and we see how she found Krypto as a baby dog on Argo City when they were trying to survive after Krypton's destruction. So this is also why Krypto has powers in the DCU, because he's also from Krypton. He's a Kryptonian dog. She's forced to watch all the people of her city, Argo City, and Krypton die as her father Zor-El saves her life and Krypto's by sending them in the pod to Earth like her cousin Kal-El, Superman, tasking her with protecting the baby Kal-El because they think that Superman is still a baby on Earth when she arrives. Helping to raise him as they will both be the last survivors of Krypton along with Krypto, so technically there are 3 Kryptonians right now in the DCU that they know about. When we get to my breakdown and Easter eggs video, we'll talk about the bottle city of Kandor and like future Man of Tomorrow Brainiac stuff. There's other Kryptonians out there in the universe that they just don't know about right now. When she arrives on Earth, she's just witnessed the deaths of everyone she's ever loved and has to slowly work through her grief as she meets Superman, who's much older now, grown into an adult, and becomes Superman in the time it took her pod to arrive. So during the movie, she is like the hot mess version of Supergirl who bristles against Superman's expectations of her to become a hero in the same way he's become when she hasn't even dealt with the trauma of losing everyone she's ever loved. So the main part of the movie in the present day is Supergirl finally dealing with some of that trauma as they search for Krem of the Yellow Hills, who has tried to kill Krypto, you thinking that they need the antidote from Krem to find a way to save Krypto's life. That's sort of like the stakes in the movie. She winds up meeting the young girl Ruthie. Krem killed her father and she wants revenge, so Supergirl sort of takes her under her wing as like a little sister kind of figure and teaches her about working through her trauma as Supergirl works through her own latent trauma about the loss of Krypton. And as she learns to be her own kind of superhero that is very different from what Superman thinks superheroes should be and act like.
Hey,
When do you think you're coming back?
I'm kind of busy right now.
James Gunn didn't write or direct the movie, but he did say the main intentions were to differentiate Supergirl from previous iterations like the Melissa Supergirl from the Arrowverse, who was written to be more like a female copy of Superman, almost like the exact same way Superman acted. When in the comics, particularly the Woman of Tomorrow comic book by Tom King that they adapted this movie from, Supergirl has a vastly different personality than Superman and very different ideas about what a superhero is supposed to be. So I do think that that is one of the most successful aspects of the movie, like they definitely are able to do that. Also, the other main goal of the movie was to broaden the cosmic side of the DCU. James Gunn recently said that they're building the DC universe, not the DC Earth, and lately we've mostly just been seeing Earth-based movies and series, like the first Superman movie in Peacemaker, which got a little cosmic, so expect more just like full cosmic series and movies in the future. Lanterns coming later this year will be like the next step in that direction. It's a bit of a hybrid between Earth-based stuff and like really pure cosmic Green Lantern stuff, so really excited about that. The bad news, though, is that the Supergirl movie is just not as good as the Superman movie, so if you love the Superman movie, this is not like the home run follow-up that you might have expected. This is mostly meant to be a smaller character piece. It's a much smaller budget than the Superman movie was, and it doesn't quite have the impact or weight or resonance of that first Superman movie, but its characters are way more complex, it's emotionally more complex, and goes way deeper into Supergirl's character than the Superman movie went into his character. Millie Alcock was great as Supergirl and Kara Zor-El, and she handles the character work, the character drama way better than the action, which is the reason why James Gunn cast her. Like, he didn't cast her because she was great at action during House of the Dragon. She almost has 0 action scenes during House of the Dragon, if you've seen that series. So I do think they'll definitely need to work on that, like the action side of her character when she comes back in future movies. The movie does serve as a great companion piece to the Superman movie, but in the overall DCU, you don't need to watch the Supergirl movie in order to understand what's happening in Man of Tomorrow or like other future DC movies. There is crossover with the Superman character, and there is like tissue that connects it with other DC movies, but like it's not absolutely necessary to understand for what's happening in those other movies.
Supergirl is a space fantasy. We are building the DC universe, not the DC planet.
The action does try to get a little more complex, especially in the abilities that they show Supergirl using. Because their biology is similar, Superman can do all the same things she can, but because of the way their brains work, the way they think to use their powers in different ways, so that's why you see them using different abilities most of the time. And they do use this Supergirl movie to sort of broaden the scope of what Superman and Supergirl are capable of doing through Supergirl's character. Tom King also did this in the original Woman of Tomorrow comic book, where you see her using a bunch of different types of abilities. So after the movie, you will feel like she is a fundamentally different character than Superman, like they're fundamentally different people, even though Superman and Supergirl form the super family. Speaking of which, I loved all of her scenes with David Cornswith's Superman in the movie. He's not in this movie a lot, but he does have enough scenes to fill out her backstory and help connect things to Superman, Man of Tomorrow, their next movie forward in the timeline. Watching her learn to deal with his bottomless optimism in what he thinks of Earth and being a superhero was hilarious and fantastic at the same time. For the most part, when she first meets Superman, she just kind of thinks that he's a bit of a dork. Like, they even have her making jokes about the trunks. If you're not a big fan of Superman's trunks, Supergirl also not a big fan of the trunks. She does care about him as family, but thinks of him as like a big goof. So it'll be interesting to see how their relationship develops in future DC movies. Technically, she is a member of the Justice Gang already, per Peacemaker Season 2, but she wasn't around during the events of the Superman movie because she was off-world getting drunk, drowning her sorrows. And to explain the timeline, the main part of the Supergirl movie takes place after that Superman post-credit scene, but it does flash back to show her origin story when she first arrived on Earth and how she arrived on Earth. If you are a big fan of that original Woman of Tomorrow comic book, you have a pretty good idea of the broad strokes of how the movie plays out, but they did change that comic book quite a bit. Most of the changes were in the Krem main villain character, and they trimmed down the number of worlds they traveled throughout the movie for budget and time, and also Jason Momoa's Lobo was not in the original comic, but Tom King said originally he was supposed to be, but at the time DC editorial wouldn't let them use the Lobo character, so they're just correcting that in the movie, and also they wanted to give him a big introduction in the DCU. So there will be big plans for Lobo in the future going forward.
Are you calling me a liar? what I am.
During the movie, she accidentally runs into him at a space bar as they're searching for Krem and the space pirates, and learns he's also looking for one of Krem's space pirate comrades on a bounty, so he winds up helping them in a very Lobo anti-hero kind of way. She cannot stand him because he is so chaotic, and he is very in tone with comic book Lobo. If you've ever seen any versions of Lobo on screen before, we have seen animated versions of Lobo before, and we've seen a couple live-action versions, but the most recent live-action version was on the Krypton series, which coincidentally also featured a version of Brainiac, and we're going to see him during the Man of Tomorrow movie. Jason Momoa's Lobo is way better than the Krypton version of Lobo, though. He is having way more fun in this movie than any other person has had in a DCU movie so far, and that's just normal for him. He hasn't lost a step since playing Aquaman in the previous movies, and Lobo was a role he was born to play. He's more suited to play and should have played in the DCEU under Zack Snyder. So the funny thing is, you could say he isn't so much playing Lobo in this movie as he's just being Jason Momoa with a little bit of makeup on, with the dial cranked up to 11 like some prosthetics on. I could do a whole video just about Jason Momoa's Lobo. He has wanted to play the character since he was a little kid, collected all the comics, he was his favorite character, and then when Zack Snyder called him about casting him as Aquaman in the DCU, he actually screen tested, thinking that he was screen testing for Lobo, and he said once he got the part and Zack Snyder called him to congratulate him, he thought that he was going to play Lobo, and Zack Snyder had to tell him, no, you're playing Aquaman, Lobo doesn't exist in my DCEU. So he was kind of disappointed, and he himself even thought that he should have played Lobo, not Aquaman. There's also a funny story about how he became the Lobo of the DCU. When James Gunn was hired to be the Kevin Feige of DC, he was one of the first people that James Gunn talked to, and Jason Momoa said, "You told me I could be Lobo," and James Gunn's response was, "I always said that you would make a great Lobo," and that was sort of like the beginning of him actually becoming Lobo, casted as Lobo in the DCU. So the idea is that James Gunn also believed, like everyone else, that Jason Momoa would have made an even better Lobo than he was Aquaman. Probably the weakest parts of this movie, though, are the main villain, Krem of the Yellow Hills. If you read the original comic book, he was written to be a very weak villain, though, so that is kind of a weakness of the original comic book, based by design. I already talked about how the action scenes were not quite as good as you would expect from like a Superman movie follow-up. That might just be because the director, Craig Gillespie, is mostly known for doing smaller character dramas in indie movies. Like the biggest studio movie he did before this was the Cruella movie at Disney. So the character work in the movie is probably the strongest part of the movie, but it makes sense that some of the action scenes were a little weak.
Why would you choose to be under a red sun?
Well, because the whiskey don't work so good when I'm like this.
I do not think the movie's going to wind up being an all-timer, but if you are like a huge Supergirl stan or a Millie Alcock stan, you will probably enjoy this for the character work. For the most part, it feels a lot like Mad Max meets the True Grit movie. Both great movies. The pacing is also good. It's not overly long like some other recent big movies. But the real bummer is that it just didn't feel like the heavy hitter that you would expect them to release right after the first Superman movie, leading off a relatively strong beginning to the DCU. Usually you would wait a little bit longer after a few major successes before trying a smaller character piece like this. There will also be a lot of Guardians of the Galaxy jokes that people will talk about after they see this movie, and not in a good way. But because I haven't talked about it, I did love the music, loved all the cosmic locations, so can't wait to see more cosmic DCU in future movies. Also really excited to see what they do with Supergirl in the future movies and all the team-ups that they put her on in those future movies. Because the movie is coming out this week, once you do have a chance to see it, post all your reactions in the comments below and try not to post spoilers in the comments on this video. I will be posting all those spoilery videos later this week. I'm in the middle of working on my full breakdown, Easter eggs, and post-credit scenes videos. There'll be a couple different videos. Those will start posting on Thursday, probably like Thursday, Friday, and Saturday maybe. So be sure to go see the movie as soon as possible because there will be a lot to talk about at the end of the movie. Everybody click here for those videos. I'll update the links as soon as I post those. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.